What's going on, Packers fans? Aaron Nagler here. Carry the G Radio, the podcast, along with my buddy Bill Schmid. Bill, it's been a minute. How you doing?
It's been a minute, Nags. I'm doing good. You look fantastic coming back from a great vacation
Thank
and
you,
a
sir.
gorgeous setup.
Yes, sir. It was a lovely time. I am very glad to be stateside, though. I'm glad to be back. I'll tell you
I
that.
imagine it is
Uh-huh.
one thing. I've only left America one time, and not that not that I'm not I'm not into
You're a
traveling around the
worldly
world,
man, of course. Yeah, no,
but I
absolutely.
like traveling in America. I'm going to stay in the States.
That's fine. That's good. I get it. And now, like, kudos to you, sir. You are now a married man. When last we
Thank
spoke,
you.
you were about to become married, and now the deed is done. So congratulations, sir. I'm very happy for you.
Thanks. And instead, mostly all I do is just take this on and off and play with it all day long. So
I remember that feeling. That's it is a weird transition to all of a sudden having that on every day.
I always wanted
I
to be a
feel you.
gold chain guy. Now I think there's a time in my life, Nags, like you have to make that decision probably 24, 25.
Sounds about right.
Once you're out of adolescence, you got to make that decision if you're going to be a chain guy. I made it too late. So I've never been a jewelry guy. So I'm trying to, get used to it.
You have to get used to it, no doubt about it. The other thing you're going to have to get used to here for a little bit is having absolutely no Packers news. That's called a transition, ladies and gentlemen. Where we've had mini camps come and go. The Packers off-season program has wrapped up, and now these guys have gone off, left to their own devices, as it were. Although I'm sure some guys will stick around town. So, Billy, I thought today we'd look at what we've learned from the Packers this offseason and try to get an idea of where we think, or more to the point, you think they're going to end up kind of when the dust settles on the division, the NFC North. Where do we see the Packers kind of falling? Because I'll tell you what, I was on with Adam Rank in his podcast yesterday, and it did get me thinking because he was asking about the division and what I thought about the Bears, etc. And I was like, you know what? This is a fun exercise because, obviously you and I, we cover the Packers and we get kind of drilled down on one specific team. But I do like the idea of trying to pull back a little bit and look at the totality of the offseason. And hey, how do the Packers stack up? Because in my mind, I'm trying not to wear green and gold glasses, but I think the Packers, they're in a really good spot. Like, I'm not sitting here telling you they're about to win the Super Bowl or anything, though that could happen. But man, what is your overall feeling to start with of the Packers having gone now through everything they've done as far as free agency, the draft? They've had these rookies in, they've started getting them on the field, so to speak. We've had some look in, a few brief glimpses from the OTA practices and the minicamp practices. Where's Billy Schmid on the green and gold heading into this summer break?
Well, I think, and I like your summer break comment because also you included everybody had to make their last day of school comments, right?
Oh,
That had to be the customary joke. It had to be done. But I think before the exit meeting, so to speak, for all the media, where now Brian is going on and talking with you guys, which was fantastic. He was on with Zabe a couple of weeks ago on the radio station, and I think they've done and executed pretty much everything that Packer fans were hoping they would do going into the offseason. Now, did it take a little bit more time at certain points? Sure, right? Like the decision on the defensive coordinator maybe took a little bit longer than some people had thought. But if you put it all in front of a Packer fan coming out the Sunday after the Niners game, I think most people would have signed up on that sheet of paper and said, okay, going to upgrade and change the inside linebackers position, going to dip our toes not only just into free agency, we're going to change it up. There's going to be a massive shakeup. One of the club's emotional leaders is going to be off the team, but you're going to feel at the end of this offseason run, I think just as good, if not better, than about the offense than you did walking off the field in San Francisco. And that's hard to do because of the run that they were on, Nag. So, I think that's where I've tried to be a little bit more cautious with the optimism, and it'll happen again. It always does come late July, early August. Right. Once you're around it, it's hard to not see the positives and the ability that could come to fruition, right? So, right now, I try to temper it, and then I already know I'll be more optimistic as a fan and somebody that talks about it all the time.
Right.
Once I'm around it, right? And you see the potential of a lot of players, but I think they're in a really good spot. You've heard it, too many guys talk about it, that they're in a position where it feels like a new window is kind of opening up. And this is the most fun time as a fan when your team is getting good. Now they got good
on
really
the come
quick.
up, so to speak.
Yes,
Right,
on the come up, so to speak. Then there's all the expectations and the wasting of windows and the contracts that got to get paid.
Right.
This is fun when you believe the best days of this group's play are still yet to come.
Yeah, they certainly feel that way, right? And I share every bit of enthusiasm you're talking about there, and there's no doubt that I'm also trying to temper my expectations, if you will, because we never know. That first game happens, and all of a sudden there's all sorts of new questions that maybe you weren't even thinking about, throughout the offseason in the summer, or even during training camp. Because how many times, to your point, you get around it there, especially on the sideline watching drills and then watching the scrimmage stuff, and you start thinking, oh, these teams pretty good. And then all of a sudden there's like an actual game, and there's game planning and all these aspects to the game that aren't prevalent and aren't present in training camp situations or even preseason games, that suddenly shatter your preconceptions pretty quickly. I mean, how many times have we looked at the defense in training camp and thought, oh, this team's pretty good, it's got some talent, we could cause some problems, and then they just get torn apart in week one. That's where I'm living as a Packers fan right now.
Yeah, and Nags, I also think one of the things that's changed my perspective of it the last couple of years have been the joint practices too. And I'm excited for it again.
Yes.
Like, I walked out 2 years ago thinking the New Orleans Saints were going to win the NFC South by like 2 or 3 games.
Right.
And they were super mid, right? So it's one of those where I then understand you do, and I think it's a little bit prisoner in the moment, but I think everybody admits to it now that when you're around it, it's easier to forecast positive things and see the potential, which is why these guys are in the position they are right now. Everybody's in a potential season. And you mentioned that we're living in a world that there's no Packers news. That's what you hope for at this particular right now.
That's a
just
good
5 weeks before, 5 weeks from Monday,
right.
It'll be the 22nd of July when they're doing their conditioning tests, and you just pray that nothing pops up because nothing good happens in this 5 weeks.
Nope. The no news is good news portion of the NFL calendar is upon us. No question about it. Now, I'm talking about being positive and expectations and things like that. It's so interesting because I've seen throughout this offseason, you talk about a Packers fan wish list as far as, okay, addressed safety position, did definitely address the inside backer position, certainly brought in a new, mostly whole new coaching staff, including a coordinator, but a lot of new names in that regard. New system, new scheme. Love what they're talking about as far as what they want out of this scheme, how they want guys to kind of play, their aggressive style, things like that. But I've been hurt, man. I've been burned before, and I'm finding it really difficult to get too excited about the defensive side of the ball. I think the sky's the limit on offense. You give the year in, so to speak, so far with this group, the struggles you saw early in the season in 2023, the way they caught fire towards the end, and now essentially they're all back, right? And they're all kind of working together, all pistons firing, so to speak. I'm totally confident on that side of the ball. And I don't think they're just going to score 40 points a week, but I think they're going to be able to move the ball. They're going to be able to score points. On defense, I love the idea of it, but it's hard for me to get too excited until these things are live.
Yeah, and Nags, I also think that us as football fans are going to be in for a different year in terms of expectations for defensive football because scores are going to be way up. I do anticipate with the change in the kickoff rules, I do anticipate there being an influx of scoring. I think that's going to, at least just on the surface.
You think so? But is that just because of the potential for better field position for
the volume of field position? What do you think? Yeah, the average starting field position being past the 30-yard line, I think is going to improve scoring our game's going to start being all 31 28, probably not, but I think the teams that are holding teams to 17.8 points a game or whatever, which I think was close to league average last year, I think that's going to be closer to 20 points a game, right? So I think those can be a little bit deceiving sometimes, in the short sample size that you'll get in the first 5 or 6 weeks, but I do understand the little bit of hesitation to it. And I think one of the other parts of it is just customary in looking at the league, especially on the defensive side of the ball. It's one of the top players at each level of
Yes, at those respective positions. Yes.
I think they have, when you add in Xavier McKinney and Jair Alexander getting back to who he is and who he can be, especially playing more man, absolutely see it in the back end.
Yeah.
Do you have it at linebacker and on the front? And that's going to be, I think, the real spot where you need to see a leap from a Rashawn Gary 1 year off of the ACL, which very well could happen.
Yep.
Or a Devontae Wyatt takes a jump that maybe somebody's not anticipating. One of those young defensive linemen becomes a real pass rush factor, because I think that's where right now they're going to lack from going to that real elite upper echelon of, instead of being a very good defense, which is going to change, I think, our perception of it, because they haven't been a very good defense in a while. Elite defense, I think they need to see some big time jumps from two guys on that unit to get to that.
Yeah,
level.
that makes sense. And maybe like a Lucas Van Ness makes a major jump, having his hand in the dirt, being asked to do a little bit some different stuff than he was under the previous regime. But yeah, I'm with you. You're gonna need some maybe quote unquote unexpected leaps as far as maybe scratching a ceiling that you weren't entirely sure or weren't aware that it was there. All of a sudden, you're turning some heads and you're thinking, "Oh wait, well, okay, well, Wyatt's like you're just wrecking fools." And maybe it's because he's being asked to do a lot less read and react, a lot less two gapping, and a lot more just get upfield and cause havoc. I could see that.
Totally.
Letting his athleticism just take over, so to speak. And look, when they drafted him, he was already somewhat older than they usually prefer in the first round. He was like 24 when they drafted him. So if there's a guy that they would love to see take a jump, it's probably Wyatt.
Well, and I think it would also change up, and you guys asked the right questions with Brian. It would potentially change what they're thinking with Kenny, depending on what that kind of leap could.
The Kenny answer was interesting, wasn't it? From Brian, I thought it'd be a little more positive, I guess is the word I'm probably going to use there. But I thought, given what Kenny had said in the locker room, it sounded like, oh, we're talking and, there's a good chance this is going to happen. But Brian made it pretty clear that, it depends on Jordan's contract, how that lays out, and trying to fit those kind of pieces together cap-wise. But also, just like his whole tone was very, oh, we'd love to have him back, but we'll see.
Yeah, it was more wait and see than, we're in the process. We're going through the steps of it.
Yeah, that was interesting to me.
That's one of the most important aspects of the game today is rushing the passer. And you can get as many cover guys and you can get a lot better and play more aggressive on the outside. Best cornerback in the league is still either TJ Watt, Myles Garrett, one of those guys that's getting after the quarterback and shrinking the amount of time they have to sit back there comfortably. If it's Wyatt, Van Ness, another great one, but like they need something a little bit more there. And I think that's players on the field. I don't know how much of that will ultimately be schemed, but I hope it does. Like you mentioned, from just the different responsibilities that you have up front, you can change the game, because this explosiveness, Devontae Wyatt's at least, that didn't go away. That swim move is still there.
It's still there.
Break it out every once in a while.
What I'm fascinated. I'm glad you brought that up, because it's like maybe not even so much the scheme change, although I do think that could potentially play a role, but also just as far as we mentioned the different characters and faces and people on the staff. Jerry Montgomery, the former defensive line coach, was pretty conservative when it came to playing young guys, getting kind of a healthy rotation. How many years did we watch, Dean Lowry out there when we were scratching our head going, why is he playing so many snaps? Or even Kenny Clark himself being out there like 90% of the time. It sure sounds like, now it all is talk here in the offseason, but it sounds like they want to be a lot more liberal in kind of sending waves of guys up front, like almost, and I think Paul Brettel put this perfectly, like a hockey shift change, right? Where you've got one group and then another group and then another group, and you're just constantly churning through those bodies up front, A, to keep them fresh, and B, to cause havoc up front with that offensive line. I think there's a potential there to unlock something as well.
Yeah, and you've seen, especially in the NFC, where, I mean, it's weird how the two conferences both seem to be so different for different periods of time, right? Like right now, all the quarterbacks that people talk about are in the AFC.
Yep.
But you got to have a hell of a roster to be able to win the NFC. And you got to have remarkable depth. I think of the Eagles, and they've done the same thing in their pass rush position.
Yes.
That's
how they won their last Super Bowl.
It's how they won their last Super Bowl. It's how they got to the other one, right? Like outside of Jalen having a remarkable year. So the Niners, obviously, they bring 7 or 8 pass rushers to the party, and it's kind of what you have to do is keep those guys fresh. And it goes to a philosophy they have that Kuhn and I talk about on the radio show all the time. He does not love the fact, and I'm generally with him, of Rashawn Gary not being on the field like 75-80% of the snaps, but they have it 1,000% in their plan of you're going to get the best play if it's 67% of the snaps instead of being on the field a couple more. But you're like,
hey man,
I'd like to see him on the field.
Not everybody can be Max Crosby. They can't all have the unstoppable motor. Although I get it, especially when it's like important down and distance late in the game. Where are our best players? Why are they not on the field? That does tend to drive me nuts. Like if the idea is to keep them fresh for those moments, why are they not out there in those moments? And that could be Rashawn, that could be Kenny, anybody along those lines. It's like I thought the whole idea was to have those guys fresh for these moments. And
yes, for this
more
3rd and 8 with 4.5 minutes left
at the end of the fourth quarter, right? And more than once or twice over the course of the Joe Barry years, it seemed like that happened way too often, where Rashawn or somebody was not on the field, and not because of injury, just because of rotation. That was always kind of mystifying to me. I'm with you there.
And maybe that's another part of the Hafley being a head coach of the defense, so to speak.
Right.
Like that was obviously Joe's situation, and it was clearly something that Matt was not trying to do when he hired the new defensive coordinator. He was not trying to babysit. He was not trying to be involved on the defense. He did not want to do that. He made that seemingly perfectly clear, I think, with this hire.
Well, let's look around the division now. Let's pull back our gaze, so to speak, and look at. We'll start with the Bears because, like I said, I was just talking to Rank, and we were talking about the Bears, and I kind of gave my 2 cents. I mean, I see a team in Chicago that, they're going to be good on defense. I don't think there's any doubt about it. They were really good last year after the trade deadline, and I think I don't see anything from this offseason as far as what they did roster-wise to make me think, oh, they're going to take a major step back or they're not going to be as tough. I just think week in and week out, the Bears defense is going to keep them in most games, if not every game. Obviously, the huge question mark is on offense with the quarterback. The Bears fans are already pushing back on my appearance, saying, well, they brought in all this talent. And I'm like, it's not Madden, dude. You're not just like sliding in these guys and like running your playbook. Like it's a rookie quarterback. I get he's the first overall pick. He's still a rookie. He is still going to have his welcome to the NFL transitional period, whether that's a month, whether that's 5 games. I don't know, but I guarantee you it's coming. And, this idea from Bears fans that they're just going to flip a switch and be this potent offense, I got news for you. Like, will there be flash plays? I have zero doubt. Will Williams show us this is the whole reason they picked him first overall?
Yeah.
Again, zero doubt. But, man, I'm just trying to have some real talk here. There are going to be tough moments, especially early for this Bears team. And I think that's more than anything why they finished probably 3rd in the division.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Rank have them going, 14-3, 15-2?
I didn't even ask. I don't want to know.
I can only imagine. But, like, this is one reason why I do think the Bears are going to be – and you mentioned their defense is going to keep them in games. Also think – just listen to this landing spot the NFL gave Caleb Williams and the Chicago Bears.
Yep.
Home against Tennessee. Houston, tough one Sunday Night Football. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
At Indianapolis, home against the Rams, home against the Panthers, London game against the Jags, on the road against Washington, against Arizona, home against the Patriots. That's their schedule before they face the Packers in Week 11. I mean, that is a very nice, easy portion of your schedule in the first 10 games or so that I think
you say that, but how much do we know about any of that? I mean, how many question marks are there as far as potential unscouted looks and people that could throw stuff at a rookie quarterback? And I understand that, like, we do this. We look at the first part of the schedule in particular because, by the time you get to middle of the season, teams are very different than what you expected. People rise and fall off their kind of offseason expectations. But, man, I'm telling you, like, the Jaguars pantsing the Bears in London would not surprise me in the least.
No.
You know what I mean? Like, there are plenty of instances there where I'm like, I wouldn't be surprised if the Bears got beat down hard.
Well, sure. And are there playoff teams in there? Absolutely, right? Texans were in the divisional round last year. Rams were an eyelash away from winning a playoff game. So it's not like they're beating up on the Washington Generals, right? But they do. It's nice.
It could have been a lot worse. No question.
all the divisional games
Right.
and their battle with Seattle and their trip to San Francisco in the back half of the schedule. So like
Right.
they gave him a nice easy lead in to a hell of a trip in the last, remaining part of the schedule. So
Right.
I think they're going to be decent. I think they're going to be good. I also think Eberflus is a good coach, right? Like, and I think
Do you
think
think he's a good head coach or a good defensive coach?
a little bit of both. I think he showed that he's a decent head coach, being able to maneuver all of the waters last year. That
is
now,
true.
granted, he
He
put
was dealing with a
themselves in,
lot. Yeah.
right? Like
Right.
he hired both of the guys that they dismissed
Right.
unceremoniously in the middle of the year.
Woo, baby.
So that's
Yeah.
a part of the head coach's job.
Yep.
But to do the head coaching thing and also coordinate the defense, like you mentioned, that got so much better under his watch.
Yeah.
I think he's a good coach. I don't know where Shane Waldron is in the offensive minds in the NFL. I think he's one of the better ones, but he's never been in the conversation for head coaching jobs, and everybody wants to give him to offensive guys. So I think that might be a little bit of a question mark. I think the Bears are going to be competitive, no doubt about it. I also think that, Nags, you're looking at a division that if somebody wins it with 12 wins, that's going to be a heck of a season, because the Minnesota Vikings, I got news for you. They're also not terrible, right? Are they good? That's going to be a difficult thing to be able to see, whoever is the quarterback there. But I think they got a great head coach in Kevin O'Connell to work with either a Sam Darnold or J.J. McCarthy if they go that way, with one of the better receivers in the NFL. So they're going to beat somebody in this division. Like, I don't see there being a 3-win team out of this group. I think it's all 12-5, 11-6, 9-8, and 6-11, something like that. It's going to be a competitive run, and I do think it still comes down to Detroit and Green Bay right there at the top. But Chicago's going to nip somebody.
Yeah, and the Vikings thing is interesting because there is a lot of talent on that team, and you look, especially on the offensive side of the ball, you look at, man, if you can just find a quarterback to pull the trigger with any kind of consistency, yeah, you're probably cooking with gas. But man, is it Darnold, who has pretty much flamed out everywhere he's been? And I know he's got history with the coach, and you certainly know he's got the physical tools, which he certainly hasn't seemingly put together at any NFL stop. But then the McCarthy thing, it's like, look, I don't think he's going to come in and light the league on fire or anything, but you certainly see a lot of promise in his college tape. And I understand why they are excited about him, why Vikings fans might be excited about him. But again, he is a rookie, and he's going to take his lumps if they throw him out there. So, yeah, I do think on the defensive side of the ball, the Vikings kind of showed towards the kind of back half of last year that they're doing a lot of it with smoke and mirrors. And if you start to get their tendencies down, you're going to be able to kind of take advantage of them. Now, obviously, they've had a whole offseason to work on that. They're going to work on that throughout camp, etc. But man, that certainly looked like a team that, okay, we know we have to do all this as far as the really aggressive nature and a lot of the trying to bait quarterbacks into things with like showing one front and bailing out into coverages, etc. Well, like that, especially that last month or so, it seemed like that kind of caught up with them. And now, do they find another approach on defense, something that isn't quite so dramatic? Maybe they do. Maybe that helps them kind of stabilize, right? But I still see a group that can probably get taken advantage of, unless they're playing at home, they get a lead, and they get that crowd behind them. That's when it's going to get tough. But outside of that, man, I think the Vikings absolutely kind of come up the shortest in this division. I think they're what the record is. Who knows?
Yeah,
I think it's the clear four. Yeah, that's what.
And I also, one of the other reasons why I guess I don't see the Vikings as a team that could be one of the top 3 picks next year is, you mentioned that defense. I think they got good enough coaching to know they have to do some of the smoke and mirrors things to try and be competitive, right? And I think that's one of the reasons why you can steal a win against Indianapolis, right? Or you can steal one against insert random NFC West team here, right? You can might be able to nip the Seahawks, but they're a team that does show some promise, and I love what they did in the draft, not reaching up, trading everything for McCarthy, keeping that second pick. Dallas Turner is a dude. So like they got some nice ads, and I think they got something to go into it with. But we had talked about it a couple of months ago, like the different tiers in the NFL, and I do still see San Francisco, with Detroit kind of lingering behind, I think Philadelphia is still right there. I really, really like what Philly did. But
You still don't believe, do you?
But, oh, no. No, now I do believe that the Packers are right in that now quad 4.
That's
because I'm starting to wonder if indeed, everything is as good as it was last year for the Detroit Lions back in the Motor City.
Yeah. I mean, look, the last thing I do want to touch on the Vikings real quick before we go to Detroit, because we haven't even mentioned Aaron Jones, who I think it's going to be so surreal to watch him play for the Vikings. I do think he's going to be a major component for their offense when he's on the field. The injury thing is real, and there's, undoubtedly going to be issues there because there always are with Aaron. But, man, you talk about, it's so funny to watch a running back change teams and go to a place where, do they really want to run the ball in Minnesota? I don't think so. I think that coach wants to throw it 50 times a game,
Yeah.
And I think Aaron Jones being involved in the passing game will help them a whole lot, because you got to think they've got some really good receivers. They got a really good tight end. The defenses are going to be playing out that face them are going to be playing a whole lot of coverage, flooding zones, etc. Aaron Jones is going to be able to eat underneath, especially on early downs. I think get him the ball in space and let him go to work. That's going to suck to watch, because I think we're going to see that a lot out of Minnesota.
He's going to be a highly productive fantasy player for while he's
totally agree.
Yeah,
totally agree.
And you mentioned Hawkinson. That's another reason why I struggle to see Minnesota being a playoff team. He misses a bit of the season. I mean, he tore that ACL late.
Late. Yeah.
But they do. I mean, they have so much talent on the offensive side that you would just, if this was Madden, and you do just go off the amount of playmakers they have, he's a remarkable check down option if Darnold can reach him. And you're also talking to the guy
knows where to throw it, right?
Nags, you're talking to the dude that said last year that Brock Purdy was going to at some point get benched for Sam Darnold. So I'm a little bit biased.
At least you owned up to it. At least you own up to it. That's good.
It's one of my better L's, one of my better losses. Just like when I said Greg Oden was going to be definitively a better NBA player than Kevin Durant. Even that's not right.
Wow. I didn't even watch the NBA, and I know that's
and I know
hot trash. Right. But, well, let's talk about Detroit. Speaking of hot trash, I kid Detroit. I kid. I mean, it's fascinating to watch Detroit grapple with success, right? Like, they are certainly
great way of putting it.
Very good program, and they have built something very real. Lasting? I don't know, man. That's like, we'll see. They certainly seem to take the necessary step forward last year. The Campbell thing is such a wild card. I mean, essentially costing his team a trip to the Super Bowl with how he was, quote, aggressiveness is what got us here. Yeah, you're on the doorstep of the Super Bowl, my guy. Take the points and play some defense, and I don't know. But, hey, it did get them there, and they do have a ton of talent. I think they're once again going to be the Packers' toughest out. Although that Thanksgiving game, ooh, baby, that gives you some real kind of warm feelings if you're a Packers fan, because Campbell had really kind of owned LaFleur prior to that game. He had really gotten after, well, no matter the quarterback, it had become pretty alarming how Detroit just looked more up for it, more physical, ready to punch the Packers in the mouth every time they faced each other. And then all of a sudden Thanksgiving happened, and it completely flipped itself on its head. And it's fascinating to me because the Packers obviously jumped out to a big lead in that game, and that's good. You can control the game, etc. But, man, don't forget, Joe Barry and that defense almost tried to give it right back. You watch the end of that game, don't forget, like, Detroit stormed back and was like, an onside kick away from having an ability to go drive down and make it a game, etc. I just hope, like, with the Packers start getting up on people this year, let's close the door. Let's shut it tight, because I can't handle these, like, we're up by 3 scores, now all of a sudden it's a game in the fourth quarter.
Detroit gave Dallas the game plan on how to all of a sudden be like, whoa, you've been getting your brakes beat off all day long.
Yep.
Have an onside kick for a chance to tie the football game. And that was basically it with Detroit. So I'm with you on the Campbell side of it, right? Like, TJ Lang was on with John and I a couple of days ago, and I love him, dude. I
love TJ.
I love
TJ's
TJ and I
TJ's
love
great.
Dan Campbell. I really
Yeah.
do. I think Dan Campbell is one of the coolest dudes to be representing a team in the NFL. However,
Absolutely.
I also don't think he gets nearly the amount of credit that he deserves for how smart he actually is, right? Is he a meathead that many people believe? Sure, probably, right?
Right.
Is he the classic football guy that more time in pads is going to be better? Yes.
Right.
But he doesn't get enough credit for, I think, the kind of offensive acumen he clearly possesses a
No
decent
doubt.
amount of it, right? Like you
Right.
don't get these jobs, and he's gotten offers for these jobs. You don't get placed in this position as a tight ends coach to then run a football team like he did in
Right.
Miami without impressing enough people because of how smart you are and how you present it. I wonder where the whole city and the whole fan base, you mentioned grappling with success. How many more times is Dan Campbell going to have to be asked, hey, man, what do you think of you guys being a Super Bowl contender this year?
Right.
Every single time he goes up to the podium, Nags, they're like asking him if they all still believe it. And he's, I can tell you 6 ways to Sunday. Yes. Yes, right. We're ready for it.
We are 100%
we want
ready
to win the
Yep.
Super Bowl.
Yep.
But it just seems like there's too many people that believe something's going to go wrong for me not to think that something might go wrong for the Detroit
Right.
Lions.
So
Does that make
seed of
sense?
doubt. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
they've put the seed of doubt out there too much for me not to buy into at least a little of it. And the little bit of it could be the Goff piece, right? They're extremely well built from the inside out, right?
Yep.
Like I think their offensive line is one of the best ones that you're going to have,
No question.
especially for a guy with his skill set.
Yep.
They're going to be a tough out, but they can be beaten, and I don't believe they're going to have the same bravado of last year where we're just going to out tough everybody because people are going to be ready for it. People
are going to be ready
for that deal
in a way, but at the same time, man, you're giving Campbell his flowers there, and I think for good reason. I think that is what he has instilled in them as far as something that translates no matter what type of game you want to play, you being the opponent, no matter what approach you take, they are going to be excellent at the fundamentals and at the idea of blocking, tackling, not beating themselves more often than not. Like they are a smart, tough football team week in and week out, and that travels, man. That translates, to any scenario, any situation, any team that you're facing, and it's down to him because they were never that prior to his arrival.
No, they weren't, and it is. I don't have the hate in my heart for the Detroit Lions like you can, and actually it is. I know that there's somebody queuing up waiting to say, well, yeah, it's because you're a gold package guy. That's why you let all of them in. Shut your mouth. More important.
I wasn't even going to bring up gold package.
Oh, I saw those wheels turning. Nagler.
You're so sensitive.
I saw those wheels turning over there.
So sensitive.
But
there's congratulations on getting all the divisional opponents this year. Well done.
Listen, going to show up for them too.
Let's
show up and show out.
I hope so.
Loud. Gonna get loud.
Or the discourse is going to get real ugly online.
Oh,
you thought last year was bad.
Oh, cow. And I've also now set these battle lines very, very firmly that I can only imagine the amount of receipts and people that are going to be ready to absolutely bombard me if that place gets bad. But it won't.
No, of course not. We're thinking
3 wins. 3 wins.
Yep.
But
there you go.
For the Campbell part, they play any game that you need to play. However, can they play the smart game?
Okay.
That will be the interesting one. That'll be
we'll
the interesting one.
We'll see. But yes, I think they're the toughest out. They're the ones that the Packers are battling for the division, in my mind. Now we'll see. Who knows? We get a month into the season and the wheels have come off in Green Bay and we're sitting here going, can we beat the Vikings? I don't know. So you never know. We'll see. But that's how we see the division. That's how we see the Packers heading into the summer break. Billy, I got an exciting announcement for our viewers and listeners. If you are one of the maybe 2-3 people who have asked throughout the course of both Beer and Ball and Carry the G Radio for a dedicated podcast feed, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I'm here to tell you it exists. It now is in existence. You can find us on Spotify, Apple, etc. All the places you get your podcasts. Carry the G Radio is now available. So go load
wherever you get
your
podcasts.
Whenever you get your podcasts, where
that's my favorite thing. Yes,
all the things, Billy. So Carry the G Radio is now a podcast, an actual podcast. God help us all. And the other exciting part is Carry the G Radio, actual radio, will be back for season 2 at 97.3 The Game.
Listen, it's such a good podcast that we're putting it on the radio, and they made it a podcast because the radio show was good. So it's now the Carry the G Radio podcast.
It's an Escher at
back on the radio.
This goes over.
It's an amazing wind turbine, Nags, that we've been able to continue to snowball
and I love that you say they put it on as a podcast. Like, I just decided to make a podcast because so many people keep asking me, like, is this a pod? Can I find the podcast feed? Is this a podcast? I'm like, fine.
No, the person that runs all podcasts now, because there's like one person that stamps off. This is a
you are a podcast. Exactly.
You are a podcast.
100%. I'm very excited.
Finally
so yes, find us wherever you get your podcasts. It's very exciting moments here with Carry the G Radio.
I'm excited to just say that it's been one thing that we aren't allowed to say it on the radio, right? We're not.
Well, because you're pumping your radio.
We're pumping. Come on, 97.3.
You got to listen to the game.
Yeah, you got to still wherever you get your podcasts. Ooh, that just sounds good. I've heard so many people say it nowadays. I just want to get in the mix.
Well, and I always throw in, including the iHeartRadio app. So there you go. You're still
podcasts.
You're still kind of doing what you need to do for the man. Still making it work.
Listen, you should get your podcasts on the iHeartRadio app. It's the easiest place to listen to them. It's the easiest place to access all of them.
I mean, obviously.
And listen to live radio like 97.3 The Game.
This is 100% true.
Yeah.
No lies told. 10-10. No notes. All right, everybody. We're going to be out of here.
Shilling.
We'll be back, I guess, next week. Are we doing this next week? Why not?
Let's do it.
We'll come up with something. Billy, I really appreciate you taking the time, man, and I will talk to you soon.
All right, man. Always fun.